Hey y'all, hey, you're tuned into no Labels, Just Vibes. We're breaking boxes and building connections.
Beyond labels and straight to truth.
Two mics, one mission.
Hey, no filter. That's the mission, the vision, the mission, the vision.
So, welcome back, guys, to No Labels, Just Vibes, where we talk about the real stuff, the unfiltered emotion, and the lessons that come with the fire, and the way we keep trying to love and go through it all.
Yeah, no pretending over here. All right. So today we're talking about when love misfires.
Mm.
So, like the moments where you're trying to communicate, but somehow it turns into chaos.
I've experienced that so many times. I can't count on one hand the amount of times I had to call you. Like, I literally tried to freaking communicate in this way and it just wasn't working.
And it just blew up like kaboom.
Boom. Because I mean, ultimately, I think that some people are literally, they process what you say through their own lens of trauma. Right.
Absolutely.
And then it comes off for me, I always feel like, if I've done my very best to explain to a person like my point of view and you're still not getting it or you're not even trying, then you
It's
are
frustrating.
dedicated to misunderstanding me in totality.
I mean, but it's frustrating, right? Like you're trying to tell somebody what it is that you want to tell them and it's not hitting.
Hmm.
It's is really frustrating. You start off very calm and gently, but then eventually you start throwing them grenades.
Right.
Boom, boom, right? Because you want to take the easy way and communicate, but then when someone is dedicated, like you said, to misunderstanding you, it pisses you off.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think that like when situations like that have arised for me, like I like to think of like my progress as stair steps up and then down, right?
Mhm.
So initially, like I'll climb the ladder just so I can try to meet a person where they're at and then try to understand them. But then once I
Yes.
get to the top and I realize that there is no like understanding, right? Or it's just one sided. Then I start to
Yeah.
decline on the ladder and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I will literally pull away because I don't have time for that, you know?
Right. Well, I think it's like a willful ignorance, right? Where a
Yeah.
person is literally choosing not to understand
Hmm.
and they don't even believe that they're wrong.
Hmm.
And I think that's like you really feel just misunderstood
But yeah.
because
So
they're trying to do that.
exactly. So like in talking about like being misunderstood, right? And like a dynamic, how do you handle it? Cuz I know like I'm still a work in progress. I'm healing. I'm not healed.
So I was talking to a client, right? And she's been having these constant arguments with her teenage daughter, right?
Mm,
And so her daughter texted her one day, like, I don't feel like you talk to us respectfully.
mm,
And I think that's why we argue so much, right?
mhm.
And she goes, "But she's the one that's disrespectful." Like, I'll ask her to do something simple, like take a bath, wash the dishes, and she ignores me, so how am I supposed to stay calm?
That repetition of having to repeat yourself, I think like everybody has a breaking point. I don't care like how much of a gentle parenter you are, right? Eventually you're going to get frustrated. And like my initial mindset is the way that we parent our kids today is not like the kids of today are not the kids of yesterday.
Absolutely not.
Right. Cause like there's this whole gentle parenting movement that's going on. So you want to be able to break those generational curses without addressing these issues of
Right.
disrespect or, non-compliance. You want to address it in a way that is not divisive or
Mm,
problematic or
mhm.
detrimental to your kid.
Right.
But then on the other side of the spectrum, it's like, yo, you got me all the way fucked up.
Facts.
Excuse my language
Facts.
for those that are sensitive.
No, no excusing of the language, but that's true. Because 'cause I'm not the one look, or the
Or
2.
two, because you got me fucked up. Because one thing about it, right? Like just thinking back on the way that, my mom, she was a single parent, and she was raising five of us. And I
Mm,
remember like my mom, she'll still tell you to this day, like, I know like I was the type of parent that would swing first and then I ask questions later.
right, right,
Those are the cycles we don't want to repeat, you know?
right.
But in the
Fact.
same token, I can see why our parents were whooping ass.
Yes, because that listen, they don't understand until you start swinging the belt. The moment you swing the belt, then there's, "Oh, I
Now you're
wanna listen,
wrong.
I get it."
Yeah.
Or honestly, I feel like we kinda have replaced the belt with consequences. Like, we're learning, right? We're learning how to instead of whooping ass, "Well, I'll take your phone." And that look, that's the end of the world for them, 'cause they be addicted. Like, like, that's
I'll
what they
take the
need.
charger.
Yes.
I'm furious in that way. I will take the
Mhm.
charger and I'll watch the light leave from your little sparkly eyes as you're watching the battery life go from fucking 100% to 5%. And now you're panicking and you don't know what to do. Well, it was that simple because I told you to wash dishes, but you ain't want to do that. So now let us sit
I'm taking
there.
notes, so I'm like, "Okay, Imma take the charger." But see, it don't work for me because my kids all have phones and all have chargers, so all she gonna do is be like, can I see your charger?"
See, but that goes back to that one bad apple spoils the bunch, right? So if
Exactly.
everybody sees that that's a consequence, right? So now if you loaning your charger, cool. Not everybody got to ante up. Put it in this basket right here. I'm going around because she's in trouble, right? And that keeps the kids. It keeps them accountable. It'll keep them accountable because they're not going to help the other kid get their way when they're in the wrong because they know that they're going to end up paying the consequence for it too.
That's right. You right about that, yep. Well, we
I'm
normally do this thing
saying.
where we do the whole what, one bound wait, one band, one sound.
Yeah,
And everybody definitely answers for something that someone else does. So
yeah,
they definitely are a lot more cautious than what they would have been if there weren't no consequences.
yeah,
But yeah, so basically she was exhausted. She's doing everything, she's holding it down, trying to tear down, those generational curses. And, she's like, well, why is she the one that's saying I'm disrespectful when she's not doing what I asked her to do?
mm,
Like, that's the she's like, "Well, why do I have to stay calm? I'm the one that's paying the bills, putting the food on the table. I'm doing all these things for her, and she's telling me that I'm disrespectful."
mm,
But I think that's, like, that real life tension, right? Because they're both saying the same thing.
mhm,
Like, it's, "You don't respect me."
mhm. No, I definitely get that, right? Because I think our parenting style is more new age than it is based on, like, how our parents raised us. So we're
Absolutely.
able to kind of, like, align and level with the kids in a way where it's like, we haven't forgotten that you're human beings, right? You are developing human beings because you still haven't stepped into your purpose and you haven't learned the
Right.
lesson that's going to set you apart, right? Later on. So we try to prime our kids for that. And it's still frustrating in the process because we're breaking our own generational traumas and the things that we went through it as, in our childhood and making sure that we do not afflict our children with that same burden, and then they have to ultimately end up healing from the things that we're healing from. So we have to be careful and mindful that we're not passing that on, right, in the
Right.
process. But that little "I am still healing, but I'm not
Mhm.
healed" is like, I'm setting this boundary. So this is the line, and I'm letting you know the moment you step across that line, it's up, my girl or
Facts.
my boy. Like it's
It's
up,
up,
right?
yes.
And I
But that's
think
the problem, though. I don't even think a lot of the kids nowadays even can see that, right? Like, she basically was kind of, um, saying that, like, her daughter almost feels like she's on the same level of
level.
authority with her,
Whoa.
and I think that's the problem, right? Because these kids are so entitled nowadays that they think they are supposed to just have everything and just we're supposed to just give them whatever they want.
So I think for me, because I don't remember if we had talked about this the first go around, right? But like a lot of my struggles with Alex, my oldest, and how, I had a conversation with my ex best friend, Raven, and she had made a profound statement to me that really pissed me off at first, but I really had to
Mhm.
sit with it. And I was like, you know what? You're right. It's whatever your kids are seeing, this is where the entitlement comes from. So for parents at home that are having like these afflictions with their kids, I need you to ask yourself, what is it that they're seeing that puts it, because kids don't just automatically have these things, right? These mindsets.
No, they
It
see it
comes
from
from
us.
somewhere. So if you're not cognitive or you're not paying attention to what it is that they're seeing, because kids go based on pattern recognition, just like A lot of adults are talking that same thing, right? And they will repeat that. She told me, she said, she said, your son has literally watched men disrespect you,
Mm,
for years, and you just ultimately sat back and you've taken it. So why do you expect more or different of your son when he's literally watching what the rule it should be?
mm.
Rule should be.
Yeah.
That's a hard pill to swallow because that requires accountability. And a lot of
Mhm.
parents, especially, and I'm gonna pick on y'all for a second. And I know I'm going off kilter, right?
Yes.
Boy moms, right? The boy moms, if you're not paying attention to the and I can say this because I've lived it, I've been through it, right? I know that my pattern was my kids. So I have 5 boys. They all watched me and their father argue and fight. They watched me cry. They watched, physical altercations.
Mhm.
All of the things that they should see a household of love and care and compassion, right? Because that's how we expect them to go out into the world and conduct themselves. But
Right.
fortunately, in a lot of ethnic households, that is just not the case.
It's
So if
not.
you don't have the father, you have a stand-in father. So they're watching over and over again for you boy moms at home that are introducing your kids to these men, right? And kids know, they know. You don't think that your son is losing respect for you?
Mm.
Even if you're still with the father and he's watching the father mistreat you, do you not think that your son is losing respect for you?
Well, also to add to that, right? Like the relationship that a child has with their parent is literally the first, guideline that they get that pretty much demonstrates how they're supposed to treat, like
Mhm,
the relationship, like you said, boy moms. It teaches young boys how they're supposed to treat their woman,
mhm,
right? And then them watching the father or whatever partner they choose to be with, right? How that partner treats their parent is also what they're seeing. And that's supposed to be, okay, I should be treating my mom like this because this is how my mom is being treated.
mhm. Yeah, it's definitely, I think, on a metaphysical level, right? Because things always they play out in the physical, they play out in the spiritual before they do the physical.
Mhm.
And so you have to understand, and I forgot what I was watching earlier today. Maybe that'll be for another episode. I wish I had better prepared. But there was a clip I was watching. No, seriously. It was a clip I was watching on TikTok, and this woman was talking about how a lot of these men, right? Men, not children, but men,
Mhm.
they grow up watching their moms be mistreated, right?
Mm.
They grow up watching their moms having to struggle, right?
Mm.
These are the same men that have come from single parent households, so predominantly raised by women, right?
Mhm.
And they will literally protect their mom, right? While simultaneously having a deep seated dislike and disdain for her. And it
Resentment.
shows because of the way that they project onto other women,
Mhm.
right? And this goes
Mhm.
back to home, but this is a difficult conversation, I think, for a lot of people to have, especially women, because women do not want to feel, nobody wants to feel, right?
Right.
Responsible for destruction of any sort.
Mhm.
But that's exactly what's happening. And you have to, like, in order to really understand, you have to understand the psychology behind the making of things, right? And I think we had talked about, not on camera, but we talked about the role of the mother. It was during our interview when we did the interview last week. And I said the role of the mother ultimately is to traumatize her child.
Yeah. Yup.
So whether you have a daughter or a son, it really doesn't fucking matter, right?
It doesn't matter.
And I've talked to people outside of that meeting, right? And I've said the same thing, and people get so triggered and offended because they're like, "No, I'm his mommy. I'm her mommy. I'm her daddy. it don't fucking matter. It don't matter whether it's intentional, it's subconscious, or it's conscious, right? That
Right.
is your role because if you do not instill some sort of seed in that child, right?
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
child, as an adult, they don't have a purpose. They don't have a purpose. I need y'all to really think about that and make that shit make sense, right? T,
Absolutely.
you didn't go through what you went through as a child. Your purpose would not be the same. It wouldn't be the same. You made up your mind when you were what, 7 or 8?
7.
You knew what
Yep.
the fuck you was about to do.
Yep.
At 7!
Those experiences are literally the catalyst sometimes that allows us to really think about what it is that we wanna do in
Mhm,
our career.
mhm.
Because most healers, right, most people in the helping profession, they're rescuing themselves.
Yeah,
They have that superhero, syndrome where I didn't have anybody there for me, let me be that for everybody else.
yeah.
And so so when you said it at first, I was like, "Well, no, I don't agree with that." But the more and more that I think about it, absolutely. Because your trauma is what creates your future. And it's not to say that you should sit in the trauma, but that's how you grow.
You grow through it.
You grow through the trauma.
And then you see some people that function in the complete opposite, right? So
Mhm.
their trauma becomes so debilitating to them that they lose sight of any sort of, this is and I did the last episode that I did for TTT was about a dark angel, right?
Mhm.
We encounter people, right, that are severely traumatized, and it's so easy to perceive them as dark entities, negative, right? We have so many different names for them. We call them narcissists, right? Essentially, they come into our lives to do exactly what it
With
is that
their
they're supposed to do because everybody can't grow from there.
right.
Everybody can't. If everybody could, the condition of this planet would be a lot better.
Yeah.
Fact that it's not because it's duality and polarity. You need both. You need people that, okay, I woke up to the light and I see,
Mhm.
I went through this as horrific as it was,
Right.
right? It still made me a better person. And then there are those that are like, because I went through this, I can never ascend. I can't go any further than where I'm at. Right.
Mhm.
And so they end up going around in the world and they are the catalyst. They become the catalyst.
Exactly. Cause literally, that's what my last relationship was.
Hey, speak on it. We already here. I know you looking like we going all the way off. I don't care. We doing this because that's what we do anyway.
Look, that was my last relationship, but even to kinda, like, go back to, the client that I was speaking about, like, she was pretty much telling me that, she was trying to do the gentle parenting because of the way she was raised.
Right.
And it kinda all ties in, right, with what you were saying because she was traumatized, and
Mhm.
she thought that she was doing right by not traumatizing her child, and it was like, "No, you're trying, right, to do the gentle parenting, but it's not working."
It's not working for you.
Because if
Yeah.
she don't go through that trauma of understanding, "Look, there's gonna be consequences," she's not going to think that mom can do anything.
Yeah.
She gonna be like, "Oh, you just saying something, I don't care." Like, what? You know?
Mhm.
And I believe, even her partner was chiming in saying like, "Oh, well, you could be less rude when you talk to her." And I'm sure that made her feel horrible, and like she's the bad guy for reacting to the constant disrespect. But
Mhm.
it's like, what do you do when your child is pretty much challenging you?
Mm.
Because that's kinda in a sense of what it is, right? When you're
Yeah.
telling them to do something and they're not listening,
Now
and I
listening.
think that's why it's so frustrating because it's like, "Yo, I had you." And for those of us who adopted, I adopted you. Regardless if you're in an authoritative role, I am raising you. You're my child. Why do you think it's okay for you to challenge me or to not do what I asked you to do the first time I asked you to do it? Now, maybe first time is a lot. Maybe like second. Look, we be on the phone. You be listening to my conversations with them kids. I be having to ask them about 2, 3 times, do something.
Said fool me once, honey. It just is what it is. And that goes back to like, I think like having those boundaries as a parent.
Absolutely.
Because I think people think that because you're gentle parenting, that you don't have to have any boundaries or rules or
Right.
constraints set up into place. And I think
Right.
that couldn't be further from the truth. It's very misleading because the point is to not re traumatize these children in the same way that we were traumatized, but you also still have to be the pillar, right? But you have to build their foundation and you cannot do that being baby shit. So you just can't.
But you know what though? What you just reminded me of, when we think about gentle parenting, I just kinda had a flashback to, like, a situation where when I was younger, y'all probably remember this back in the day, right? "Because I said so."
Yeah.
Well, why can't I? Because you can't. Well, why not?
Excuse me?
Right? And I used to be that parent.
I just don't understand.
Why can't I? Right?
Right.
And my daughter was like, "But that's not an explanation." And that pissed me off, like, "What you mean that's not an explanation?" Because it's not an explanation, right? We are
Mhm.
here to traumatize our children, right, and to teach them, but they're here to teach us too.
Yeah.
But they ain't ready for that, right? Because in the moment, I was like, "I said so, don't do this." And my daughter
Mhm.
was like, "Well, that's not a good enough reason." Took me out. But it's true. If I would have just said the reason, there wouldn't
Mhm.
have been a need for that comment. And that's a part of the gentle parenting, right? Where it's like, because I said so is not framed as this is healthy or this is safe. But if I say, okay, well, we hold hands in the parking lot or we look both ways while we're walking through the street, not only is that teaching them what to do, but it's also teaching them that when someone asks you a question, you respond.
Right.
So it's like they don't do what we say
You're doing it.
do. They do what we show them, what they see, like you were saying, right? And so even back in the day, we used to feel like what they say, children were seen and not heard,
But it took our
and that
voice away with that mindset,
it
that
did,
ideology, right? Because look
it
at the
did
various amount of kids that don't s they didn't speak up because, they were going through something that they
trauma,
should have been able to entrust an adult to
but they
speak
couldn't.
on or about, but they were told, "Oh, what happens in this house stays in the
Stays in this house. Facts, facts, absolutely. And this is kind of on the line of how we were parented back in the day.
Mhm,
It is not like that anymore, like, because we as a generation are like, "Look, I don't want my kids growing up like how I did."
mhm.
And we have to find that balance, right, where the discipline comes in, but also the gentle parenting and the kindness and the clarity, right? Because if a kid knows what's allowed and why it matters, and they're more willing to listen
Yes,
versus because I said so. Do it because I want you to. Well, how is that really like you giving me any type of explanation.
yeah,
So my kids, they try me, but why can't I be on my phone all night? Well, baby, like you can't be on your phone all night. You only supposed to watch screens for a short amount of time. You need to let your eyes rest. Your brain needs to rest. Like, let's try something else. Let's read a book.
yes.
That sounds better than because I said so. Don't be asking me no questions. And so it's the more that we kind of go through, it's like, damn, like our parents was mean.
But they weren't though. I mean, they were, but they weren't.
They could have explained to us a lot
They
more
right,
than just being like, because I said so.
right.
Well, because this is what it is. And that's, you could not ask no questions. And I think we're creating a safe space where our kids are able to feel like, okay, I can ask mom a question.
Mhm.
Like we're allowing ourselves to be more vulnerable and allowing them to have a safe space where they can ask us, well, why can't I do this like this? If I would have asked my parents questions, it would have
It
been,
it would've been out for you all the way.
yeah,
We probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
exactly.
It went down in the DM back in the day.
Listen,
Let me ask you with that client, like, how were you able to kind of guide her into through that frustration? Because that is something I think that a lot of us, especially like this new generation of children that we're having, a lot of us combat that, right?
yeah.
It's a battle between the old belief and then knowing that it's not right, right? Because it's not giving a fruitful outcome.
Right. So I think we left off on when I was basically saying like her partner was saying that she was rude and, she's pretty much feeling unseen. And now it's like she felt like nobody got it.
Mhm,
Like, and she started building that resentment, because that's what's really happening. And the mom is trying to, she's trying to create a space that was different than what she experienced.
mm,
And so we ended up having a joint session where I was able to allow both of them to express how they both felt.
mhm,
And I think once they were able to, explain like, well, this is why I feel this and that's why I feel that, they were just trying to survive. Like they were able to understand because when you have a joint session sometimes versus, an individual session, you're only getting one person's side of the story, right? And so they still feel what they feel, but they're not able to hear what the other person feels. And
exactly.
so when you have a joint session, that is a space for me to come in and say, listen, your mom feels like you don't listen to her. And then she can share her side of the story. And then I can say, hey, I know you feel like X, Y, and Z. And so everybody gets hurt. And that's the problem. They're just trying to survive in the moment because if you think about, there's this thing called the anger iceberg.
Okay.
And so if you think about like the emotion that's underneath, like it's so much hidden underneath the disrespect, right? And
Uh,
so it's so much more that if when we started digging down into it in the session, we started realizing that it wasn't just anger, but it was feeling unseen, right?
mhm,
For the daughter. It was the constant disrespect and the frustration for the mother. And it was just all these things, right? And then I think it really aligned with the people pleaser cycle because she was taught to just fix things and walk on eggshells and, just say sorry, keep the peace, right?
mhm,
And so it was literally like her being conditioned in that way to handle conflict by avoiding it,
mhm.
right? And so what that really does is take away from like different levels where the initial wound was something else. It wasn't even the disrespect. It was the constant disrespect. It was her feeling like she's not being heard. It was the frustration of having to keep repeating herself. And so she was feeling unseen, and that's what she was actually reacting to. So the disrespect wasn't initially the
Wasn't
issue.
the core issue. There was something deeper than that.
Exactly. And so when we are able to uncover that, right,
Mhm.
we can see past the tip of the iceberg. And
Mm,
so when we talk about the inner iceberg, it's almost like think about like how an iceberg is formed. You only can see the tip of it. You can't see anything else underneath, right? So
Titanic.
Ex right, right. So all you can see is the anger at the top.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that's literally the emotion that we always jump to. It's, like that's what we've been taught to do, get angry. And so we've been taught to get upset, we've been taught to get frustrated, but a lot of people haven't been taught how to express what they're feeling.
Yes.
And that's what it means to look underneath the anger iceberg and say, you know what? This is what I'm really feeling. And when we're actually able to do that, it's like, okay. And this is a really beautiful, exchange in a joint session because that's when they can say, well, I feel X, Y, and Z when you don't listen to what I ask you to do,
Mm,
when you don't put away the clothes that I ask you to do. Because there's also like a dynamic there where it's parent and child. And so we have to do like this balance where the parent is not trying to be the friend to the child, but they're an authority, right? There's a level of authority that's there. And so if this child has trouble following authority, that's already a challenge for them. Because I think a lot of parents go wrong when they try to be their kid's friend.
all the way.
And my kids will tell you, like, "Mama is not our friend." I'll play with them. I love playing games with them. I love joking with them. You hear us all the time on the phone with the kids playing games and all kinds of stuff. But what you won't do is be disrespectful, because
Yeah.
that's when Imma pull you up.
Yeah.
And so, you know, um, I think that's the difference. Gotta call y'all, my bad. But that's the problem, right? Because when you begin to try to be their friend, that's when they feel like they're on your level of authority. That's when that entitlement comes. That's when they feel like they
The lines are
neck
blurred.
to neck. Facts.
All right. So I don't know. I just had this thought that popped across, right? 'Cause I know we're on the topic of parenting,
Mhm.
but how do you address that when it's somebody of your own age group, right? And a past situation, you already know what I'm talking about, right?
The
Where
wheels are spinning. I'm
person
listening.
might feel entitled,
Mm.
right? And be, apprehensive to clear guidance, because I know, like,
Mm.
in a relationship dynamic, this happens. It's almost very similar to that of the parenting dynamic that you're speaking on now,
Mm.
right? The only difference is you add a romantic level to it. So, like, how does
Mm.
a person kind of, like, get past that?
Well, I think it's a little bit different, right, when you begin to add romance because, there's a different dynamic at play.
Mm,
And, sex could
uh-huh.
be a great thing.
It can be, but I'm sorry, it ain't.
But that's the difference, right? Because the thing is, when you are allowing yourself to be, vulnerable with your partner in that way, yeah, there could definitely be some influence there.
Yeah.
A lot of influence, right? Whereas though with a child and a parent, that vulnerability is not there.
Mm,
So it's almost like imagine like a wall for a parent and a child.
mhm.
'Cause that child isn't doing anything that's making that parent feel like they have to bend or do any actually, they could use guilt. They could use guilt
It happens a
to
lot,
bend.
though.
Yeah,
It happens a lot because I
they could
remember
use guilt to
parenting
make
from
the
a place
parent
of guilt
bend.
for a long time.
Mhm. But when it's the versus a relationship, it's a little bit different because, that emotional intimacy, right? The sex, the vulnerability that comes is more so what is used. So I would just say it's different in the way that they I don't want to say manipulate, but in the way that they impact or influence
Mhm.
each other.
I see. It's definitely not on the same level, obviously,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I just felt inclined to ask that because I know, like, I just see it so much on social media, right?
Mhm.
And I think, like, just because 'cause we're women, right? And there's so many women that complain about feeling like they get with these guys that expect them to, like, be their caretakers. They pretty much want a screwable mommy, you know?
Yeah. But you know what? You know what that goes back to?
Childhood trauma. Can we talk about it?
Attachment
No?
styles.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not ready for that. They're not ready for that,
No, they not.
you know?
It goes back to, again, what that child saw growing up,
Exactly.
what they experienced growing up, right? Like,
Mhm.
how their parent literally parented them.
Mm,
What is their attachment style? Is it secure, where they actually had, a pretty good, healthy relationship with their parents?
mhm,
Is it insecure where they felt ignored? The parent just ruled and didn't give them any type of understanding, and so now they're pulling away from guidance. They don't like to ask for help, right? Is it anxious, where the child did a lot of tantrums and they learned to seek approval
mm,
because their caregiver was inconsistent?
mhm,
Right? Or the fact that, they fear criticism or they overreact. Was it disorganized trauma where
mhm,
the caregiver was kind of giving them intermittent amounts of comfort and threat? And so the child shows contradictory behavior where there's like a fear but also an anger
right,
toward the parent, right?
mhm,
And that's as adults, you can kind of see that when like they'll be confused about authority.
yeah,
They go in between like compliance and defiance and they mistrust guidance.
mhm,
So, like it's definitely about the emotional, childhood trauma or neglect.
yeah,
And those are literally the things that lead to, kids feeling like they're being ignored or like because their emotional needs weren't met.
right.
And so they have to learn to protect themselves from harm. But that does impact how in the way that you see that in adults as they get older.
So, like, moving forward from the childhood state, right, into adults, like, what are some ways that you would be able to identify some of the if a person has gone through these traumas, right? So we're not going to put any labels on it because we just talked about different relationships earlier today, right? So let's
Yes.
say, hypothetically speaking, you have maybe a partner that maybe had like a rough upbringing,
Mhm.
and so now you're tasked with having to help them through, not heal them from their stuff, because I think
Mhm.
a lot of us sometimes we get stuck in that, right? These are not our
Mhm.
children. They're now full-size adults, right? So how
Mhm.
can you identify that somebody has gone through some severe childhood trauma, and how can you best show up to support them?
I honestly think it's all in the attachment style that they
Mm,
have. Like you'll know when a person is secure. Without a shout of a doubt, we both know someone who has a very secured attachment style. Who am I talking about?
you? No?
Me.
Oh, Vaughn?
Vaughn.
You talking about Vaughn? Yo, that conversation, she like, I don't know what to talk about, baby, but I ain't going for that.
Listen, all the time.
Yeah.
Look, that has been her energy from the beginning,
And
okay?
that's
Like
amazing because you never had to worry about her switching up or the other shoe to drop because she always
exactly.
maintained who she was from the beginning
She
up until
did.
the present.
She did, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't expecting the other shoe to drop.
Right, but
That
it
doesn't
didn't.
mean that I
It
wasn't
didn't.
self-sabotaging,
Mhm,
right? Because I was expecting
mhm,
for her to change up on me. I was expecting that it was manipulation. And so I learned to protect myself And I also did this self-sabotage behavior where I was testing and
Ooh,
pushing her away to see how hard she would be willing to fight.
because I do that. Why? Only the strong survive, baby.
Listen, for real though,
Because if you want me, you gotta prove it. That's bad.
it
That's
is
bad.
bad. It is, but you've learned to do it through your trauma. It's like in your mind, it's almost like, okay, I know if I give this person such a hard time, they will either be gone and I ain't gotta worry about it, or they will fight hard. And who's gonna fight hard just to abandon me?
Yeah. I mean, there are people that do it though,
It,
because I've
but that's what I'm
experienced that.
saying.
So it's
There
like, yeah,
are people
you're
there are
all
people that
doomed.
do it. I mean, there are people who do it, but the thing is, if you as a child learn that love had to be earned, you're more willing to do the self-sabotaging behavior
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you learned that it's conditional. And we always talk about that, right? And I think it's important to learn like how to break the pattern of self-sabotaging
Mm.
where you ask yourself like am I acting out of fear, like is this really going to help our relationship excel, or am I acting out of curiosity where I'm
Mm.
only doing this because I just want to know if this person is going to stick around? Or we had a conversation about this, putting yourself in the fire to see if you can get out.
I wish I had audio up here because it would be some songs played, honey. But yeah, I think that's definitely full disclosure, right? Because I consider myself very self sacrificial, or at least a retiree, right? But not even
Not a retiree.
retiree at that, right? Because I don't have the time and the energy now, right? I got other things to worry about.
That's right.
But prior to, like, I do feel like, I would do that to my own detriment. And then
Mhm.
also, it's like, when somebody comes into my space, now I got to be able to put the person to the test because I've seen so much evidence that, these people, they will come into your life and they have their own agendas, right? And
Mhm.
it have absolutely nothing to do with your betterment, right? Or your growth. And even though you come into it with, a pure intention, people will have their own agendas.
Absolutely.
So now I gotta see, and even when I see, it's like, I don't know, let me test a little further. And I don't know why I do this, but I
You're
literally
not
will
alone.
hate somebody and to the point that I just hate them. Like I have a for them. So now it's like, yo, I couldn't do what was necessary initially to get rid of this person out of my life, right? So I'm gonna let them keep hanging themselves, hanging themselves, hanging themselves. And I'm watching, and each time my level of disdain for that individual is growing because I'm like, "Ugh, we like
You know
that?"
what that reminds me of? That reminds me of that clip we watched with that guy where he was saying a woman, well, not a woman, but a person will allow their partner to keep on doing the same thing to hang themselves so that way it's easier for them to walk away.
Walk away. Yeah, and that's a fact. You know what I'm saying? Because now it's like Kevin Gates said, right? Suspect no evil of anybody until see it. Once see it, don't forget it.
Mhm.
Nah, verbatim, right? So I watched you partake in these evil, intents against me, right?
Mhm.
Even though you know it was going to hurt you to lose me, but you didn't take into consideration because you didn't see the value in me. So now that I know, it's like, yo, you're willing to
Mhm.
move on without me. Cool.
Mm.
I don't want you, right?
Mhm.
But then it's even like, because, people always try to double back. They'll try to spin the block on you.
Absolutely.
And I believe that saying, right? Your ex only come back to see if you're still stupid. Well, guess what? I done graduated, cap and gown. You're not welcome here.
I think that honestly, like you say, it is just you, but it's not just you. Like I think there is a lot of us out here, and I already admitted that I was there too.
Mhm.
But I think we test people because it's a way to gather evidence about
Mm,
whether they are going to hurt you. Do they really care about you? Or, I mean, it's often rooted in, past trauma, right?
yeah,
But we don't see that.
yeah,
And I think there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety,
yeah,
and I think there's a desire for acceptance and even reassurance.
yeah.
So it's like you begin to see this person and they scare the hell out of you. So you're like, I don't know about this person. I know what my past was. Let me go ahead and
You have to go.
subconsciously. these situations so I can see if somebody's gonna fight for me. Prove your loyalty. Let's go. Come on.
Yes, it's the battle of the fittest, baby. Only the strong.
Listen, because we
So
do it
toxic.
and we do it. It is toxic. It's very, but look, we do it. We withhold affection. We get distant. We don't reach out. We'll ghost somebody temporarily just to see if they care enough to reach back out.
To
Ooh, I'm
reach
pulling
out.
my own card there. I did that. I'll even go a little step further. When me and Vaughn we were not officially dating, but it was kind of like in the earlier days. We got together in May, my birthday month. You already know that story. But anyway, so when we were kind of talking, but it wasn't like solidified, I self sabotaged by going to see someone else.
Uh,
We ain't have sex. We ain't kiss. We ain't do nothing crazy. But I did not feel like she was fighting hard enough for me.
mm.
So I needed to make her jealous.
So you had an unspoken expectation of her,
Mhm.
and she's
No, it wasn't
literally
even unspoken because I asked her. I'd be like, "So what we doing?" And she'd be
mm.
like, "What you mean? We cool. We kicking it." Like, "What?
So,
Okay. Yeah, I gotta test this. I need to see what's going on. I need."
yeah, because
And
is
the
that
thing
how you
is,
really feel, or
right.
you just telling
Well,
me you trying to keep it cool?
exactly, because I thought she had her own agenda. Now remember, I was hurt when I
Yeah,
met her.
yeah,
We was not even looking for each other, right? But the thing is, sometimes partners or friends do things that benefit them. But trauma will make you very hypervigilant and you will interpret that ambiguous behavior as a lack of care.
yeah.
And the thing is, healthy relationships involve a lot of mutual respect and negotiation. It's
Mm,
not about proving or testing or, like this imaginary, well, I need to see you fight for me. And I literally have seen it like we've been together about 5 years now. So I've seen it from the beginning of who I was in the beginning, where I was testing her
to
to
now.
now. And you will hear us sometimes because you and I will be on the phone and here she coming talking some mess and we start fussing. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And it's a conversation.
And that's the thing that was the one thing that I had brought up because I was talking to Ashley earlier today, and I was like, "Yo, like, if I was to come out the closet, like, eventually, right?" But then I was walking to the store and I seen these two lesbians fighting, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm good. Like, I'm good." Cause I don't want to be with somebody that is trying to beat my ass on a daily, or I'm trying to beat
Absolutely
theirs
not.
on a daily, right? It seems very serene. Like I want somebody that's not a copy and paste version of myself, right? But someone that would understand. And and I was like, yo, I was like, my sister and her wife are like the perfect example of a fucking lesbian couple, right? Because they don't argue, they have disagreements. And even their disagreements, it could look like an argument, but it's not even the same stature, right? Because it'll literally be like, yo, Vaughn, she don't put up with nothing. So if it makes her feel uncomfortable, he's Audi 2000. We already explained this, right? She'd be like, yo, I'm gonna catch you when I'm ready to have a conversation, but I'm
Yep.
letting you know I'm not ready to talk right now, right?
Mhm.
But you like me, you like to address shit right now. Like, yo,
Yes,
I
we
gotta
need
get
to
out the
talk.
way because my anxiety is going off, right? But it just meshes because eventually
Mhm.
you have to come down from here and you have to
Right.
kind of like balance yourself out because
Before we can have a
because because
conversation.
because it's comfortable, not just because it's comfortable, because it's beneficial for the both of y'all, because that's how she deals with conflict, right? And so you
Mhm.
can't just, oh, I don't care how you deal with conflict. I want to handle it right now because that's not fair, right?
Right.
That's you respecting who she is as a person and understanding, like, yo, maybe she's going through some things that force
Mhm.
her to be able, she needs space in order to process shit first so that when she does come back, she can come back and have a conversation like a
Right.
normal human being, right? And you
Yes.
already have that in you. It's just the anxiety. So you'll just
Mhm.
basically go off and you'll go off on a tangent. You'll be like, man, fuck this, like da da da. And then you're like, yo, I was bugging. Like, I understand. Hey, yo, I'll be like, yo, sis, come on. That was unnecessary. You did not have to say that to her. You'd be like, no,
Yeah, you be checking me all the time. You be checking me all the time. You be like, "Sis, I know you no, you didn't. You can't do that." And I'll be like, "Shit, yes, I
do
can."
what I want.
What's the bull, right? The
That's
bull.
the bull. It's stubborn, right? But you don't put that on a you don't put it on a platform to where it's like, "Oh, Imma use my astrology and the fact that I am a bull because I could take it there if I wanted to, right? But this is a relationship of a different caliber, right? So it having something that you prayed for and being able to maintain it, you have understood and recognized
Mhm.
what it takes to actually sustain it and to keep it, right? You can't
Absolutely.
always just lean into, well, this is how I would have I would have handled
Mhm.
the situation.
Mhm.
Girl, we finna deal with this right now because you don't know. You are rushing to have to try to deal with something in the moment, right? Just
Right.
because it's convenient for you might
For
be
me,
inconvenience for
for
her.
her.
And
Right.
so she's not giving you her 100% solid, authentic self because now you pressured her into
Right. I forced her.
that she wasn't ready to have. And I can
Mhm.
completely relate to that because I, like, even with dealing with Shay and me trying to be the healthy one in the relationship and me saying, yo, like, realize that you're an overly emotional person, right? And
Mhm.
there were parts of him that I resonated with so deeply, especially the anxious attachment, right? And the
Mm.
resolve issues right off the rip. But I don't associate with that person anymore, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody doesn't operate on that same trajectory,
Right.
myself included. So I'm like, yo, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to separate myself from this. Please just give me 5 to 10 minutes, right? It's people out there will ghost you for days until they're ready to have a conversation. I'm
They sure
literally
will.
asking for 5 to 10, maybe 20 minutes tops. Let me go and be fucking mad because I'm allowed to be mad. I feel
Yeah, you are.
disrespected. I feel violated. Let me
Right.
feel that. Let me process it and then let me come back to you level headed. You know what I'm saying? So that way, the way that I come at you is not in a toxic manner. It's not making you feel
Right.
valued as a man. It's not making you feel disrespected, right? I can
Mhm.
actually hear you and you can hear me. But that didn't go. It didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. It always just went against me. So I was like, man,
Yeah.
they don't want to hear nothing we gotta say. Anyway, over. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
I mean, I think it's like I have tried you heard me try to have a conversation with Vaughn
Yeah,
when Vaughn is not ready. It
yeah,
does not go well.
yeah,
It's like talking to a wall. I
yeah.
have to pull teeth, try to force her, like, to respond, and it's not beneficial
Mhm.
because it's not really communication. It's me talking to someone who don't wanna be bothered,
Yeah.
to
So she
someone
got a
who
wall up.
is
It's you talking to a brick
exactly.
wall. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not necessarily stonewalling because she will respond, but it's not Vaughn.
She's not receptive to it because she's not ready.
Exactly. And I had to realize that, right? And so, like, when you were kinda talking about, like, that couple you saw who were having a fight, I think people fall for domestic violence, right? Because it's shaped by their early experiences, right? So, they learned certain beliefs about love.
Mhm.
And it's about unmet needs. It's about their attachment style and like childhood patterns and I think in like an insecure attachment, people with anxious or avoidant attachment styles unconsciously seek out relationships that replicate familiarity. Like they even if it's dysfunctional, what they're used to, their homeostasis says, "Let me feel this familiar pattern again." It's
Mhm.
dysfunctional, it's messed up, but I need to feel it because that's what they're used
Mhm.
to. And so that early trauma of either witnessing abuse or having neglect in childhood can normalize those
Mhm.
unhealthy behaviors
Yes.
and blur boundaries. And so that's when a person struggles to enforce boundaries.
Mhm. So how do you like if you were doing a couples counseling session, right?
Mhm.
You saw these issues come up, like how would you help the couple combat that? And how to actually identify like how the person communicates, how their
You
person
mean
communicates.
you mean like around DV?
It could be that, or it could just be, maybe it didn't get to that level of extremity, right, with DV, but I mean, just encompass all of it.
Well, it's kinda hard to kinda, like, incorporate all of it into an answer because that's a very
It's broad.
complicated Yeah, it's
Okay,
very broad, but, basically, what I like to do is find where the unmet needs are.
okay.
That's the pretty much the first thing that I will do by asking them certain questions, and I dive deep into what so there was this couple that I had, you kinda remind me of this couple I had, and I'm not a judger, I will not judge, but it's kinda trippy the way they ended up together. They were both married, one of them was going through DV, and they got a divorce, and they both ended up marrying each other. And so that well, they were actually, they were cheating on their wife and husband at the time. Like, is I'm not a judger, right?
It
I
sounds
don't judge,
crap.
but the way they got together was kinda trippy. I'm leaving out some things because there's some other things to it. But
Mm,
anyway, and so we called it what did I call it? I think I either called it, like, the dark passenger or I called it, like, the shadow,
mhm,
right? I was externalizing the problem because the problem was the way that they got together.
mm,
So, when they actually got married, then they started having questions wondering if their partner was gonna cheat on them, which is literally what happens in most couples. The way that you get together can really impact the relationship. But for them, like, that was, like, the end all be all because they were really struggling. And then to make matters worse, one of the partners was talking to someone else. They weren't cheating, but they were engaging in communication with other individuals. And so it made the other partner feel insecure,
mm,
which she had every right to feel. And so when we kind of talk about communication, I tell them I don't tolerate arguments, right? Like we can talk all day long. You can express your feelings. I try to give them a safe space where anything they say but there's also a level of respect. And I try to get them to not interrupt each other. And I teach them a lot of I statements.
mhm,
Well, I feel hurt when, I feel this when, right? And I'm trying to have them practice like active listening skills. And this definitely helped with communication because if you're listening to respond, and I think I told you, like, my someone that used to be really close to me basically taught me, like, he was like, you listen for a response. He's like, "You don't listen to actually understand, you listen to respond." And that at the time, I was like, "What did they talk about? Nuh-uh, da da da." But I had to, like, realize, like, yo, like, that's mad true. Like,
mm,
I do listen, and I have my response formulated. I was talking to Vaughn earlier this morning, and she was like no, I'm sorry, it was last night. She was like, because I was talking to her about one of our episodes, and I was getting irritated with her because at the end of the episode, she was like, "I want" what did she say? "I want some apple juice." And I'm just looking at her like, "Really? Like, that's what you say?" And she was like, "I'm listening. Like, I don't have a response. I am actively listening." And she was like, it's a learned ability. I learned it from my wife." And I'm looking like, touche, touche. Because I had to eventually learn how to listen and not formulate a response immediately like I used to.
mm,
How I allow couples to communicate during the session, something to that nature. And I was talking about that couple that I was speaking about, and how because they got together while they were both still married. Now the issue is, well, now I have this fear and I have this insecurity that my partner is going to leave me for someone else.
mm,
And so, by externalizing the problem and calling it, um, you know, by externalizing the problem and calling it what it is, right? Like it was a dark passenger, dark cloud, a shadow. It was a lot easier to allow them to speak their truth. And I even remember them saying, like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe, that we're actually having this conversation because I created a safe space for them where they could feel vulnerable enough with each other to express how they felt. And they felt so relieved. They felt so good. They were like, oh my gosh, like, Tania, thank you so much. Like, it feels good to finally be able to say that. Like, I got it off my chest. So it was really weighing them down. The fact that they were having these both of them were having these feelings, but they didn't talk about it, so they didn't know that they were both concerned about the way they got together.
Yeah, okay. You know, and I think that's really important, right? Because I think in the beginning of a lot of relationships, we don't have like these important conversations.
Mhm.
Instead, we lead with unspoken expectations, and that's something that literally keeps coming up so much, right? Because we assume that because we kind of like engage or gauge the person physically, everything else is just gonna kind of fall together. When in fact, that's literally the worst, in my opinion. It's the worst thing that
And
you
mine too.
possibly do because
Yeah,
you've seen the proof of leading with physical versus not. And the outcome were significantly different.
yeah,
So I'm just now in my phase where I'm just learning that.
yeah.
And I'm not that much older than you, but being a little bit older, it's kind of crazy because it's like I would feel like I would have learned that a long time ago.
Well,
And I
that
also feel
goes
like I'm at a disadvantage because I was married, for about 15 years. So by the time I was 17, I was already,
listen,
I was locked up.
I was
Dang!
19. I was 16 in the relationship, and I was 19 when I got married, so
Married, yeah. So
it
it's
honestly
no yeah.
falls in alignment with our experiences. And, like, I know we talk a lot about how our lives are mirrored, but it's so crazy, like, a lot of our experiences were very similar.
Mhm.
And I know it's like, "Oh, well, I should have known this," but we can't really say that
You don't got to get
because
the foresight.
that's our journey, and some of the things that you're going through them because you don't know them, and this
Exactly.
is your time for you to learn them.
Exactly.
And so, if we talk about those unrealistic expectations where we assume that love is gonna solve everything,
And it
we
doesn't.
don't prepare for
Yeah.
conflict. We don't prepare for trauma. We don't even prepare for how you like to have arguments.
Mhm.
We're not asking the right questions.
We don't. We kind of again,
It's gonna be fine.
it's because, a lot of people they just lead with the physical part and they expect, and that's one of the things that I really dislike, like in this dating society where everybody's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go with the flow."
Right.
You gotta make that make sense to me, right? I need to personally, I knew that like when I was dating Raw and he had first told me that because I knew what I wanted. I knew what I was looking for, right? And I just made the mistake of being like, oh, you're my person, right? You're my person. I know I want you, right?
Mhm,
But he was more or less like, yo, I'm just going with the flow. And I
mhm.
didn't realize like the dude that I dated before him was on the same accord. So I'm like, this is pretty much how you guys steal time from women, right? Y'all just fucking playing.
They not choosing you. They
You're
just
not
telling
choosing me. That's why you say you're going with the flow because you want to see how far or how much you can actually potentially drain from me
Mhm,
before I get sick of you,
mm,
which I already don't like y'all. So don't come
mm.
around me with that going with the flow nonsense because you got to be intentional, right? Going with the flow means, hey, I'm just gonna, for me, it means
Whatever
I'm just gonna
happens.
give you my body, right? I might potentially be a little bit vulnerable, but only to the extent that I'm comfortable with, right? So I'm not ever going to truly give you any depth. There's
Mm,
not going to be any real dates. There's not going to be any real courting, right?
mhm.
I have no desire or interest in actually getting to know you,
Right.
right? I'm just going to know you at a surface level, and then we can have mundane surface level conversations. Whereas when you're intentional, then you're having these conversations because you
Right.
see this person as your potential long-term
Partner.
partner.
That's
And
right.
because you see them as such,
You
now
invest
you're
in
making
them.
sure that we ain't gonna be no mishaps. And there might
Right.
be, right? But it's not gonna be because we didn't properly prepare, right? They say
Right.
get ready or stay ready so you ain't got to get ready.
Facts.
So when I come into a relationship with a person, I'm gonna make sure I'm asking the right questions. Like I told you the other day, I was talking to this guy via text message, and I shocked my damn self. I was like, "Good job, girl."
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I was like, "Sissy would be here." Like, yes,
Yup.
because I was asking questions. For me, I know that I crave emotional depth. Right? I don't like surface level mundane conversations. That shit really just it makes my skin crawl. I hate it. I despise it. It's lazy, it's purposeful,
Mhm.
don't mean nothing, right?
Well, I think that's why we're demisexuals. Like, you have to stimulate the mind first.
Exactly. So in order to do that, like I have to be able to get to depth of your soul, and I expect you to want to do the same thing for me, right?
Right. Well,
Like,
that
I
goes
need
with
to
the
know how
investment.
you handle conflict. I
Right,
need to know what your past missteps were, not so I can judge you, right? So I can make sure that you continue elevating in the process of being in my presence, right? I need to make sure that you're even emotionally available. Like, are you there?
right.
You know what I'm saying? Because if you can't if you're not showing up for you, I
How
would
do you
I
show up
would be crazy to think that you could possibly show up for me. There's just no way. That's
well,
insanity.
you
And a
kinda
lot of people, they get trapped in the delusion of thinking this person is showing you they don't really mess with you like that. They don't even like you like that. But also that is a mirror reflection of how they actually feel about themselves. So taking that into account, if they don't like themselves, why the do you think that they're supposed to like you more than they like themselves?
I think that's a lot of people are in denial about that.
It's
A
giving
lot
delusion. It's giving
is given
what's
delusion,
not
yes.
clicking, Stanley. I need you to wake up. Wake up expeditiously. It's
Well,
crazy.
I think that that unrealistic expectation, like you said, like, there isn't communication about anything deep, right? There's this expectation that the other partner is just gonna respond perfectly or understand you, and then you ignore incompatibility, right? And we're older now, so
You
we're
ain't got
not
no
like in our
excuse.
20s and all the little kid stuff and all the teenage and young
Yeah.
adults. We not playing games. Like, you have to have a very intentional conversation where you even emotionally invest in one another. When my wife and I, were friends, we were building an intentional friendship before a relationship was even a thought. And of course, the Drake for bunch, we have 6 kids. So kids, at least in our case,
Mhm,
make us way more intentional
mhm,
about what it was that we were doing.
mhm.
We asked our children, "Hey, how do you feel about us dating?" Before we even got into a relationship, before we even became intimate. Can you believe that? We asked our kids how they felt about it. We didn't assume like, okay, well, everything will be fine. We talked about it. We was like, listen, is 6 kids involved in this? Are you sure you really want to do this?
Everybody gotta be
One
on
accord.
yeah,
Because I think a lot of people will that excitement of, "Oh my gosh, I found my partner," it can blind you. It can make you think like, "Okay, even if they're not showing up for me in the way I need them to, they'll change. They'll get there."
yeah.
Will it though?
The romanticizing of a person's potential,
That's it.
and
That's
that
it.
and I catch
Potential.
myself doing that, and I'd be like,
Pull it back.
"Pull it back, baby
Pull it
girl,
back.
'cause you
Because
remember what
we
happened last time, right?
well,
You
social
remember."
social media also, right,
Mhm.
portrays relationships as effortless if there's true love.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's no work that has to be done.
Yeah. Because they only show the good moments.
The perfect
The
moment.
perfect moments. Look at they look so happy, but you don't know
Exactly.
what's going on behind closed
Behind
doors when
closed
the
doors,
camera's
you
not
don't
filming.
know.
You know what I'm saying? And I can take a lot of social media influencers like the one their family based YouTube channel was that the King's family. King's family. Hey, I don't know how it goes. My kids be watching it over here.
Okay.
But the back end that came out like a couple of years after. Like I
Wait, are
remember
you talking
watching
about
that.
T.I. family?
Not, I mean, that's just one, but he's more of a mainstream celebrity. But I'm talking about as far as like the YouTube because everything is social media, right? So
Well,
you
look
got these couples that blow up overnight because it's so aesthetic and hashtag couple goals, but you
right.
don't know what people
What's
are
really
going
going
through
on?
on the back end. These
Listen,
women are pretending to be happy whole time. They're catching these men that are, oh, he's daddy of the year on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, but he's also a cheating, philandering, good for nothing,
narcissistic.
all of that, and it could be the woman too. All I'm
Well,
saying is watch who you idolizing.
absolutely, because even in T.I.'s family, everything is imploding, but it's
Oh, yeah.
always looks so good on the outside.
Slide. Yep.
Even Beyonce and Jay-Z, it always looks so good on the outside.
All looks perfect. And I think we were just talking about the other day, or was it actually? With
No, we
that
was
baby. That was us, right? Okay.
so it's like we don't consider that trauma.
Hmm.
We are not trauma informed when we're dating.
Well,
Like,
yeah.
it's not even a conversation Well, how did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Those conversations don't happen. We actually avoid it because it's uncomfortable
because it requires a level of depth, right?
in work.
And when somebody tells you, like, I'm actually hurting because this is what happened to me, you know what I'm saying? A lot of us are emotionally unavailable.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like we don't recognize that there is relationship fragility because there are no coping strategies. The relationship is vulnerable. You don't
Mhm,
know how to have a conflict the right way.
mhm.
You don't know how to communicate your needs, which leads to what? Unmet needs. You're the triggered every 5 seconds. You triggering each other because y'all don't know what the triggers are. How
'Cause
can a
you're not
relationship grow like
cognitive of,
that?
yeah. What's that? That's that iceberg method you was talking about,
Anger
right?
iceberg. Yes,
And
ma'am.
Dr. Spirit was talking about that on a few podcasts that she had been featured on. I hope one day if you're watching Dr. Spirit, you'll come on ours. But
We would love that.
hi,
Come
yo,
be a guest girl.
we gonna tag her in this video. But you know, that's one of the things I remember watching one of her episodes that she was talking about when she does, you know, couples therapy, and it's you know, the man that is cheating, right? He will literally have one offset reason, right? And it's usually my wife wasn't paying enough attention to me, right?
Mhm,
And I went through this with my ex-husband, right? And I remember going through a time frame where I was like, you know, so mad at him, but then I had to look at what I was going through at that time.
mhm.
Now, this is not to put the blame, you know, take the blame from him because he still made a choice, right?
Right.
But I also have to be mindful. We have 8 children in total, you know?
Baby, look at what my wifey just made me, y'all.
Oh, what is it? It looks delicious. I see a cinnamon stick in there.
Baby, what is it?
No, we need an in-person studio. We need to get like two T-Pain. So Von could
My language is act of service, and I love to eat.
yeah,
I'm a
hey,
foodie.
there you go.
So, she just hit all of my love languages
Hey,
at once.
on
I'm
what? Is that
telling
gonna be a good night? What
listen, you already know.
shit? Playing
I didn't even know
Beyonce in the
what she
background.
said. Mhm,
Mm-mm. But you know, with the relationship or the past marriage, I said I understand why he felt the need to, you know, venture out. I don't respect it, right? Because I was working in EMS at the time and I was severely depressed. And I remember coming home to him,
mm,
telling him that I didn't want to live, you know,
mm.
from just the amount of shit that I was seeing on a day-to-day basis. And so him not having that capacity to hold space
Hold
for me at
space for
that
you.
time, right? And then ultimately, you know, that caused like an emotional distance. So I no
Mm,
longer wanted to sleep with him, you know,
mm.
which I can take accountability for that, right? But in the same token, I'm like, yo, like you weren't there for me the way that I needed you to be, and I couldn't be there for you because you weren't there for me, right? So it's this thing where we're like bleeding on to each other.
Plus, y'all was young.
No, we weren't that young. When me and Christian got married, I was 32.
Really? I thought you was younger than that.
No, I met him when I was 17. We didn't get married until, and I might be lying. I might have been 28 or 32. Matter of fact, I'm lying. I was 28 when we got married,
I mean, I still consider your 20s
and I
to
was
still be
20,
young.
I was 32 when we got separated, and 33 when we made it official that we were getting a divorce.
Mhm. But that's what I'm saying, like, your 20s, even if it's, like, your later 20s, is still your 20s, and you're
20s.
still pretty young.
Yeah, it's still a baby essentially. You
You
know, I
still
had
don't
done
know.
nothing. I had done accomplished nothing outside of becoming a mother, you know, and a wife. I had managed to get myself a ring and, you know,
Mm,
I pushed out, you know, 6 babies for this man. Outside of that, I wasn't accomplished. I started school so many times and I never finished. You
mm,
know, I would get a job and then I would quit, and I would get another job and I would quit, and I would get
mm.
another job. So there was no, I hadn't established any roots for myself. My entire identity was
Was
encompassed in
around
my
him.
husband and my children.
That was me too.
And people don't talk about that enough, right?
Only difference is I did finish school.
And you were smart though. I was lazy. So I was like, I ain't got to work. My
I was
husband
lazy
got
too.
2 jobs.
I was lazy
He
too,
got
don't get
two,
it twisted.
huh?
I was lazy too, don't get it twisted.
Well, I didn't have the ambition. We'll just call it that. Because I was literally in my mind at that time, right? Just looking back, I was just so bonkered down with like, the responsibilities of 7 children,
I can't imagine.
then, being his wife and making sure that, I'm
Everything is clean
performing
and cooked and
and clean, and then I gotta make sure that I'm performing
listen,
appropriately so that his mom, is not chastising me, which never ended and never stopped.
we gotta give wait, no,
I gotta
we
give
gotta
you
give
one of
you
those too.
a clap.
I got my kittens though. When they get a little
Yes.
bigger, Imma put them on my shoulder. I'll be like, "This
That's
is
crazy. You was the
really
real MVP though.
profile." Huh?
7 kids. I literally was a stay-at-home mom to 2, and it was driving me crazy.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, and
It's a
people don't tell
lot, and
people how
people
it's
try
a
to make
whole
it seem like
job.
being a stay-at-home mom, "Oh, it's so easy. You don't work." That is work. Are you fucking retarded?
The kids gotta eat,
They
they
gotta
gotta
eat,
sleep, they
the
gotta
house
be
has to be
fed
clean, I have to educate them, make sure that they are productive citizens to
for the
be able
world.
to go out into this world and not be terrors or deviants.
Not terrorists.
I'm saying, I mean, look at the byproduct of moms
Glutton.
not being at home with their kids. Look at the shit that we have running rampant on a day-to-day basis. And I apologize to talk about anybody's children. If you're offended, that means your child's a deviant. However, all I'm saying is somebody knows somebody that knows somebody,
Right,
right?
and
Who
they
doesn't
refuse
put
to
in
take
any
accountability.
energy or effort into their children.
Yep, and they refuse to take accountability. That's
And they
all
don't want
spade
to.
a
They'd be
spade.
like, they'd be the first ones up at the school talking about, I heard
Right.
you. No. Why did your kid think it was okay to go to school and do this? This heinous, devious thing.
Mhm.
What? What are they saying? I used to date somebody, right? And their daughters still keep in contact with me to this day. And my
Awesome.
daughters are, I know, it looked like it was good. My
Girl.
daughters still talk to her, right? And so, like, I remember, like, them kind of hanging out and some of the behaviors that they would show and exemplify. And I'm like, yo, like, me as a mom versus like Shakim B is two different people,
Of
right?
course.
The way that I conduct and I carry myself around my children, completely different.
Of
It's
course.
completely different. And I don't care what anybody else says, oh, you got to be real. No, because the bottom line is this, right? And I still lead as the person that I want my children to be, but it's still their choice, right? But in front of them, if I smoke, I go outside. I don't sit here and smoke in front of my kids. I will not drink blatantly in front of my kids. Right? I don't play them games with them and they already know. Mommy, what's that? Mind your business is what you could do.
Yeah.
But that twerking and that hot girl summer ratchet
Mm-mm.
shit, people do not think that that affects, especially these young girls.
It
You're
does.
teaching them to be trash and you're sending them outside to do the same thing that you did and then your mama did and her mama prior to that.
Mm. You right
But that's
about
somebody gonna complain about this episode, and that's okay, honey. That's all
we
right.
not we
When
not making this episode,
when you know better, you do
because we
better.
holding people's hands or we sugarcoating shit. We
Yeah,
telling
it
people it
is
is,
what it is at this
and if
point.
somebody don't like it, they don't have to listen.
Yeah, you could tune off, but the bottom line is this, right? I think where everybody went wrong a long time ago, and this has been a topic that's come up a lot over the last week, right? Is we no longer have community. When it comes to when we talk about raising children, right?
Right.
Full circle. When it comes to raising children, it takes a village.
It sure
And
does.
the problem is that can't nobody tell the village nothing
Mhm.
no more, right? Because everybody want to be a chief. Nobody wants to be an
An
Indian.
Indian, yep.
Everybody got to be head honcho. Everybody's self-serving. And they use these babies as collateral damage to boost their egos.
Mhm.
And this women are not exempt from this. Because I see it a lot. And it's downright trifling.
Mhm.
It's trifling, right? But in building community, you have to be able to hear the hard truths. Cause at some point somebody neglected to tell you, like, yo, sis,
Take accountability.
you gotta take accountability. You shouldn't be twerking with your homegirls in front of your 7-year-old daughter. Why are
Right,
you doing
because she
that?
gonna be doing the same thing as you. Again, kids do what they see,
They
not
don't
what
do
they
what you
hear.
tell them to do. They do as they see, not as they're told.
Exactly.
Right? And there we have some of us in our community, we go through mental health. and that's okay, right? Allow somebody to step in and help you
Mhm.
that's not going through that. Because it's supposed to be about the children and making sure that they are well-rounded and structured so that they can take over and do the work that maybe you fell short on
Right.
or the work that you started.
Facts. And that's why this episode is called "Sitting in the Fire," right? Because you can't grow without the heat.
Yeah, at all.
And
You know,
so I think, like that a lot of what you were speaking about, right? Like we have to until we're able to take accountability for how our actions impact our children, things are going to continue to stay the same.
I
And
agree.
and that's a hard truth that a lot of people don't want to hear, right? But even as you were speaking, like there are a lot of parents, not just mothers, fathers too.
Mhm.
Sometimes aunts, uncles, the friends that the parents
Grandmamas.
have, everybody and like you said, there isn't a village, and this was actually one of the things that we did research about how the grandparents are no longer surviving long enough to help with the kids, or if they're surviving, they just don't wanna help. And so it's like the parents have no choice. They're doing it on their own. And, like the relationship ends and one of the parents decide to just not be around.
Mhm.
Or they wanna be one of those holiday parents,
Mhm.
the fun parent. But the messed up part is the parent that kids don't see the most is the one they want the most. When the one that they're actually with, spending day in and day out all night and up all day with them, that's the one that, they treat like, "It's okay. Mama always be there."
Yeah. It's that fear of missing out. You know what I mean? Like they know that they have another parent and, for maybe like, because I know we are roles reversed, you and I, right? You have yours full time. I get mine every other weekend, and that's
Mhm,
not by choice. It is
mhm,
literally because I didn't have the education, the knowledge, the know-how, or the resources to help me,
mhm.
not be in this situation, right?
Right.
And because he knew that I was battling with mental health and
He took
various
advantage of
different
it.
issues, he took that to his advantage.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And I could have if I had been a little smarter and if I would have listened to my mom, right? But I didn't. So I think to say that it's like, yo, you could have the community available, but are you willing
To
to
use it and
use it?
listen.
Because some of us are so like stuck in our ways. That's
Mhm.
something I'm gonna have to pay. I'm gonna have to there's gonna be karma and retribution behind that, right?
Yeah.
And I know that. And I feel like it's already happening. But on the flip side, my kids know that I'm literally 20 minutes a bus ride straight up and down.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I'll never tell my kids you can't come over.
Right. I mean, and that's that's kind of a part of trauma.
Mm,
Like the fact that your relationship with your mother was not in a space where you were willing to listen to her because a lot of the things that you've experienced, right? Like it created a need for you to kind of overcompensate, right? And it's not just you, but me too sometimes where we think that we know best better than other people. And so it doesn't allow us the space to listen to what someone is saying.
right.
Even though we know that that person has been alive 30 plus years, longer than us.
Hmm.
But everybody has different experiences that they've gone through. And, it just depends on, what that parent child dynamic was like. Because sometimes with some, parents and children, the child should not listen, should not. But then there are some parents who have something to say, and the child should definitely listen.
I agree 100%. You
But
popular.
just
All
a
right.
minute.
So I don't know if you wanted to get to kind of like the closing of this. Because I feel like we've said a lot. And for me, this was a really good episode.
Hmm.
We talked a lot about the parenting dynamic, right? And breaking generational cycles and how that can, kind of seep into your romantic life. We
Hmm.
talked about things to be able to be on the lookout for, whilst either scoping out or actively in these romantic relationships that could potentially indicate, the level of trauma that our partner has endured
Right.
right? We talked about the iceberg method, which I'm gonna send an email to Dr. Spirit because I really want her and you to collaborate.
I've never
You
heard.
gotta look her up, yo. She's so magical.
Send me
I cried. The first episode I listened to
mm.
her, I literally cried because I was like, yo, I felt like Cardi B. Am I the drama? Am I the drama?
Okay, well, I definitely have to, hear her out. Definitely.
It's great. It's great.
But I think, like in our community, right? Like it's something that's always tied back to the well, whatever happens in this house stays in this house, right? And so when you needed to talk or to vent, like you're not allowed the space because they always tell us to stay in a child's
Child
place.
first.
And when you spoke, you speak when you're spoken to.
Mm.
And so you pretty much deal with all of the trauma dumping, right? That's coming from our generation of our parents, and now we're carrying it around.
Yes.
And so that's literally the whole point of breaking generational curses, right? Because, you know, um, I think it's really important to just kind of look at the difference between how things were back in the day to now. We're still paying for the sins of our
Um,
grandparents' sins. And so, I think, like, if we actually had, grandparents who spoke up about what was going on, or if we spoke up to our grandparents, listen, it was like, you can't talk to anybody outside of the house about what our business is. I don't need them people up in my house. Like, and I think that was about the mistrust of the government. And that's what it really boils down to is we didn't believe that we could trust.
mm,
And, just talking about the Black community in general, there is a mistrust of the government being able to help us because there's been a constant pattern of people just
abuse
being
of
let
that.
down.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
No, I definitely wholeheartedly agree with that. And I feel like hopefully our next episode will do a political reaction to Jasmine Crockett because I know we were talking about that yesterday.
Yes, Jasmine Crockett. Listen, send this one to Jasmine. She is
Yes.
so
Jasmine for president, period.
right, but we ready for her though.
Get the Cheeto Puff out. But yeah, I think I don't have like any additional thoughts to add, but I feel like everything that was said was like super or it should have been super empowering, right? And I know that everybody's not going to agree with every single portion of this episode, especially the accountability part, but it's okay, right? You got to take it to the bank, ruminate on it, right? And then go back and then try to exchange it and liquidate that. But
So let's bring it full circle. The mom in that story that I was talking about, she started realizing that she's not a bad parent
Mhm.
and she's just reacting from a place of hurt. And her daughter recognized that she's not a bad kid. She's just craving a little bit more autonomy and respect.
Mm,
So when they actually listened and stopped yelling at each other, they were able to communicate. And that's what healing looks like.
right. You got to be able to hear the other person um and be receptive to their point of view, right? And not just look at it like, oh, this is my inferior, right? And I'm superior. And I think that's a huge part of gentle parenting
Mhm.
is the ability to not look at these children as if, it's like I'm better than you or
Right.
I'm more valuable than you, right?
Right.
It's I have made mistakes so that you don't have
You have
to,
to.
right? So if anybody is at home watching this episode and they have, I don't know, like hard-headed teenagers,
Or
okay,
preteens.
preteens, right? That think they know everything.
Sure
I
do.
want you to mandate this for homework. Have them watch this episode, right? We're gonna be creating a lot more content just like this at some point. I don't know when, but oh, we're gonna be talking about this frequently, right? Because I feel like it's very important for there to be a mutual community understanding between the elders and the younger generation because we can't build something from nothing.
So what's the homework?
Watch the video.
Yeah, but, like, what are they supposed to be doing? Like, what's the
Okay, so watch the video and then comment what the takeaway was, right? What are these kids getting from this message,
Mhm.
right? And then to do you one more, right? And I think this is something that we don't do enough collectively as a people, right? And my mom has always done this without any prompting before I ever became a life coach or anything like that. But my mom would open up to vulnerabilities that she went through in her life, right? Because I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in our adult life, right? We're still holding on to resentment for things that we still haven't been able to forgive our parents for without even actually truly understanding who our parents were and
Mm,
a lot of the stuff that they went through, right? Because when you understand that, and I'm not saying all this is to give, super abusive parents a pass, right?
mhm,
But this is to create a level of compassion and empathy in you. It has to be in you, it's not on you. You understand?
mhm,
You cannot claim to love anybody, parents included, if you cannot understand them. Yes, I understand that my mom might have failed in certain aspects of my life, right? But my mom, like you said, did the best that she could with the tools that she had available, right?
mhm,
And actually, my mom was probably a generational and curse breaker of her time in her own right.
mhm,
So for that, I always have to give love and respect to her because that was a hard job. That
mhm,
wasn't easy.
mm.
That's it. That's all.
Yeah. And so if you're listening, and you've been in that space and, there has been some things that we said that you guys got a little heated about. Maybe we triggered some people. That's okay. Just breathe, take some time and really work through it. Understand why did it trigger you? What's going on that made you feel what you felt? Because there's something there in your iceberg. What made you angry? And dive down deep and figure out why you got angry about it.
How do you move forward?
Yeah, thank you for listening to No Labels, Just Vibes. And if this episode hit home for you, share it with someone you love, maybe even someone you've misfired with, a parent, a child, your mama, and just subscribe, like, comment. Please drop your comments down below. Right there. Yep,
But yeah,
and express what your biggest takeaway was from our episode today.
absolutely.
All right, y'all. This
Bye.